لو تغينا مسكنو فلنا فريه بنا كنتبع لنا
سلام ኣብ ርሑቕን ቀረባን ትርከቡ ተኸታተልቲ ቴለቪዥን ኤርትራ ከመይ ቀኒኹም
مأعلى سافي أجبعي نحب فرح نجيفر.
Good afternoon, dear Erisat viewers. Today we have a special guest, Ahmed Yusuf Mohammed, President of the Eritrea and Afar National Congress, EANCE. Today we will be discussing about the current Eritrean situation and geopolitics in our country. At the same time also AB Ahmed's vision or AB Ahmed's dream about the port of Assab. Welcome Ahmed Yusuf Mohammed to Television Erisat.
Thank you, Brother Hanok, for having us and to join you in this Erisat program. Appreciate it.
Thank you again. So today, as I said earlier, we will be discussing the current situation in Eritrea and Ethiopia in relation to the claim made by AB Ahmed with regard to the access to the sea. So before we get deep into the topic of discussion, please give us a brief background of yourself and the Eritrea and Afar National Congress, EANCE.
Thank you very much once again, Brother Hanok. My name is Ahmed Yusuf Mohammed. I'm currently serving as President of Eritrea and Afar National Congress. Our organization, EANC, is Exiled Indigenous Afar Political Organization, which is dedicated to self-determination, internal self-determination, and self-rule of Eritrea and Afar people in their coastal homeland of Dankalia. Our political and cultural goals in Eritrea is to end the oppression of our indigenous people, the marginalization, the persecution, and ethnic cleansing of our people. As we speak, it continues inside Eritrea by the hands of the PFDJ and the current government of Eritrea. Having said that, our vision and aspiration is to establish a new democratic Eritrea with power-sharing constitution that distributes power between Eritrea's central government and 8 of its provinces, as it was known prior to 1991, namely 𝐒𝐂𝐻, Barka, Dankalia, Hamasein, Sahel, Samher, Sarai, and Senhit. These are the traditional provinces of Eritrea, and our vision is to have a power-sharing constitution which gives Dankalia a rights to establish its own Afar state, a democratically elected Eritrean Afar state in Dankalia. Pretty much that sums up what we stand for. And my background is I was born in Assab, in Harsile, in a village called just outskirts of Assab. And basically, right now I am living in Canada, and that's it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ahmed, you are saying that the EANC is looking for self-determination for the Dankalia people, for the indigenous Dankalian people. So that means you are saying that you're recognizing 8 regions and then the Dankalia region to have a self-determination. So are you looking for your own state, or so how does it going to work? Is that going to divide Eritrea as a country?
No, that's not our objective. Our objective is to have a strong Eritrea where a decentralized constitution is in place through federal system, as it is in most advanced countries in the world. So having regions like Dankalia and others who have been in place prior to the current Eritrean regimes that Eritreans have come to know as a safe and democratic and equal opportunity country. Basically, when we say Dankalia's self-rule, it means only as a province of Eritrea, not as a fragmented part of Eritrea or looking for any secession from Eritrea.
Okay, so the self-rule should be applied to all the regions or only to the Afar area? So
all the regions.
All the
Yeah.
regions.
All the regions through the constitutional arrangements. That's what I
Okay.
said in the beginning. Power sharing. Right now, as you know, the power is only concentrated at the hands of a few, which is PFDJ. None of these regions are recognized. As we go through the interview, I'll get back to Dankalia and historic facts. But what we have known to, even in a country that we live in whether it's United States or Canada, arrangements are made between provinces and federal states, which is in Canada, in the States, in between various states in the federal government in America. And this has been a proven fact, and it's a proven model that has provided a degree of autonomy for those who are being marginalized, and which we think Dankalia deserves to be part of this arrangement. And this is why we're calling for establishing this kind of a framework for Eritrea's continuity as well as its unity.
So this the one thing that is, the self-rule or autonomous authority is one thing, and then also the right for self-determination. So, for instance, if you go to Ethiopia, there is regional or autonomous regions, and then there is also Article 39 with self-determination, right? The Article 39. So secession. So that means self-determination is also is it like for secession, or what is the self-determination for, to be part of the constitution that you guys were looking?
Yeah, no, we're not talking about Ethiopian constitution, even though it's a federal constitution that gives autonomy for regions, that's as it's known in Killil, and Afar has in part of Ethiopia have their own Killil. Similar thing, but as far as secession goes, we're not going to the degree to secede from Eritrea, as I said. All we are calling for is to have at Dankalia a traditional homeland to be governed by the Afars themselves. Only Afar know what Dankalia and the people of Afar want, and the aspirations and dreams, and so this rule to be equally applied to all the regions. That's why I mentioned 8 regions. Some say there is 9 regions, but the formula provides a degree of autonomy for all of our people who are marginalized. I think this federal system, a decentralized federal system, is the way to go for Eritrea.
All right. Okay. Good, Mr. Ahmed. So, as you say, if you look back into history, also there is this autonomous regional administration prior to independence.
Right.
So, but we will get to that one down the discussion. But today we also focus on the current situation, especially with AB Ahmed's speech at the parliament with regards to access to the sea. So Ethiopia always have an eye on Assab to get access to the sea. Before independence, the Dankalia was a self-autonomous territory during the Haile Selassie Empire. During that time, your father, Sheikh Yusuf Muhammad, was the governor of Dankalia and later served as mayor of Assab. So what can you tell us the relationship back then? And then why was Dankalia self-autonomous separately from Eritrea? So if I'm not mistaken, Dankalia was the only one which is self-autonomous, not the rest of the regions during the Haile Selassie. So why was that? And then I'm going to share also the picture of your father right here, so then we can tell us a little bit about your father and also the history. Okay?
Wonderful. So you must remember the Afar self-rule actually goes beyond the time of the Emperor Haile Selassie. It goes back to 5 millennia. When the Portuguese expedition first came in 1460s, 100, the area Portuguese have documented, it's called the area, the Afar country. It could be found in its Portuguese maps and so on. When later on, when the Ottoman Turks have also recognized and signed agreements with the Afar sultanates in the 1550s and the 1500s in places like Rahaita, Biru, in Obok, and part of Tajora in Djibouti. The Turkish Empire actually built homes that can currently found in part of these cities in Eritrea and part of in Djibouti. So later on, the Egyptians came in 1872, followed by the European colonialism, which we all know, the coming of the Franco-Italian colonialists coming to the shores of our region, the east coast of Africa. So the Italians have came and actually at the beginning there was no resistance from the Afar, namely because they came as traders and those who are looking for good relations. So the Afar made agreements, and some of these documents can also be found. The agreements they made between the sultanates of Rahaita, and in not all Afar have welcomed, and there was an anti-colonial resistance was also main factor in Sultanate of 𝐒𝐄𝐓, for example. There was the Afar resistance actually prevented the Italians to come from Assab. As you may know, that when they first came, the Italians came the area, especially in Assab. They called this area Colonia de Assab, and then it translated to the Colonia the Asmara, and then the Eritrea, and then it's expanded to Asmara. So in the way was this Afar Sultan, was a young sultan called Yasin Haisama, and he prevented the Italians going through the mainland Eritrea, as well as penetrating into Ethiopia. So later on, that the Italian rule came to end with a British mandate in 1941, and Eritrea was annexed into Ethiopia in 1952. The pictures that you saw about my father that's when the Afar, like I said, on all of these times, the Afar had ruled. Like I said, degree of autonomy in this part of Red Sea and Dankalia in particular. So my father was the first governor of Dankalia and the Red Sea, as the posters would show you. At that time, he served in Ethiopian Parliament, as you may know. The Eritrea was annexed, and I think it was for at least 10 years he served in the Parliament of Ethiopia in Addis Ababa, representing Dankalia and the Afar people. So then after that, he was not the only person to have governed Eritrea. There was others like Sheikh Muhammad Ibrahim Shehem, who came after him. He's still alive. And during the Derg time also, the Assab autonomy was actually Assab had autonomy under Derg. Mengistu Haile Mariam have designated the Dankalia region from Bori to Rahaita, which is known as Dankalia today, under a gentleman by the name of Muhammoda, who is still with us. So he governed Dankalia as a governor of Dankalia at that time. So this to show you that the Afar self-rule in Dankalia, which I discuss when I discuss about the ENC's visions and aspirations, it's not something new that the new generations of Afar from Eritrea are imposing on anyone, but it has been a tradition of Afar leaders have been serving as the caretakers of Dankalia throughout historic times, from colonial times and from those who are internal aggressors, from the Abyssinia time, from the emperor time. All of this history shows that the Afar people had a degree of autonomy and self-governance of Eritrea and Dankalia. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's thank you for the background explanation. So you were saying that your father was a parliamentary member, as we have seen also in the picture, and also the governor.
These are actually the picture that you're showing here is actually is sitting with Sultan of Rahaita on this side. These are the traditional Afar leaders, and he was a political leader as well as a traditional Afar leader. So the Afar governance was actually like when the time of Italians, for example, was the Afar governed according to their customary laws. The sultanates of Rahaita and the sultanate of Biru had control over their land and people. So even the sharing of wealth, the sharing of land goes according to the constitution of Afar, which is called Mada. So this is what the Afar have prior to all of these governments. The customary law was the law of the land, the way they govern themselves.
Okay, Mr. Ahmed. So, growing up as a son of a governor, mayor, and parliament member, so what do you recall when you grow up? Probably, if you are, remembering something from back then.
Well, the days were obviously different. Those days, like I said, we spoke Afar, and we practiced economic freedom as Afar people. You may know the Afar traditional economy are trades through across the Red Sea to Yemen and Saudi Arabia and Djibouti, and including to Ethiopia. So the Afar had freedom of movement. They had a vast wealth of animal wealth. They had known to have as nomadic pastoralists. They raise animals, and they used to export their animals and feed, and through the economic structure of animal husbandry, as well as in the ports. The many Afar leaders were even the Italian times as a port laborers in port, and those who are administrators. And like I said, the Assab and Dankalia being a governor, its own self-government, they have dealt with Ethiopia in a particular way when Ethiopia's rule was there as I was growing. Even though the Amharic was the official language of Eritrea back then, but the Afar practiced and learned and used the language of Afar to advance their economic and social and cultural things. But most importantly, the Ethiopians have recognized the Afar as indigenous communities, indigenous people, indigenous nation that deserves the right to self-rule, self-govern itself. So what I remember is having those freedom as a youngster. I could travel to anywhere I want, to Djibouti, to Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and in Ethiopia. And, the Afar cultural and family structure was intact, not like it's broken down into a marginalization that we see today. So those were good days. But having said that, the Afar also understood the self-determination of Eritreans to be an independent nation, and have also contributed in a very contributed in a large scale to have the Eritrean aspirations of Eritrean people to be as an independent state. But unfortunately, after 1991, the Afar have been the target of this the government. And I know you will be speaking about the port of Assab. During this time, in the 1954, during my father's time, I remember there was I was told, I was not born in 1954, but there was a time when the conflict, there was regarding the port of Assab, the laborers. There was a labor strike in 1954 between the Afar laborers and those Ethiopians, the Haile Selassie regime was importing people who work, the laborers from the highlands of Ethiopia to work in Assab. And the Afar have revolted against that, demanding that the Afar be given the first opportunity to work in the port. And since the port and the region belongs to the Afar, it's only fair to ask that the Afar people have the right to work, not bringing laborers from the highlands of Ethiopia, for example. And there was almost so the military came in, open fired on the Afar who protested. 3 Afar men were killed, and 3 were wounded, and I think there was 3 Ethiopian Kuber Zabenya at that time they used to call them, were killed. In this is to show you that the rights of Afar people at that time was respected in some degree, so the Ethiopians have recognized that. So this is the kind of background we grew up as youngsters in Assab.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ahmed. So just briefly to ask you, you know, as you have been saying that, then it's also from history, during the Haile Selassie, even during the Derg regime, there was a self-autonomy for Assab, and then also the Dankalia region. And many believe that that was part of the grand Ethiopian plan. If Eritrea gets successful in getting its independence, so that they can have access to Assab, because Assab is a self-autonomous territory. So they say that that was part of their plan. That was the reason that they were given self-autonomy to the Dankalia people or Assab. So especially during the Derg regime, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was specifically there was a self-autonomy for Assab. So not for the Dankalia region. So what can you, or how do you respond to this one?
I think your point, I think your question is, this was a deliberate attempt by Ethiopia to gain access to Assab. That's why they have recognized the Afar rights. It's probably, you are probably right, but that doesn't take away the recognition factor, which is what we are fighting for in Eritrea today. Say, for example, if the Assab in the current PFDJ Eritrea, if Eritrea were to recognize the Afar rights to self-rule, to govern, I don't think we would have this much problem or hostilities between the two nations. As being indigenous people in the land and know how to live off the land, whether it's from the sea or from the fish or whatever it is, we would have access to, we would have been the link between Ethiopia and Eritrea to have a good, friendly, neighborly relations, including economic ties, to have access to the port, to have Ethiopia's. Remember, prior to independence of Eritrea, and in fact after the independence of Eritrea, Ethiopia had access to Assab and used have used in a very good relations with EPLF, at that time. So if you look at in both sides, yes, Ethiopia may have had a political intent to break up Eritrea using Afar as an excuse, but at the same time, what is Eritrea without the use of the people, right? If Eritreans were to be benefiting from you take the example of Afar, if the Afar had a self-rule in Dankalia, for example, have benefited from it, those benefits would translate to the rest of Eritrea, and the goods and services and all the rights to a freedom of economy. This is what we want, as long as the sovereignty of Eritrea is respected. I think Eritreans in large would support having good relations with Ethiopia. In fact, this is why when Abiy and Isaias came to agreement in 2018, that's what everyone was hoping for, to have a normal relations. Yes, as Eritreans, we would be we have to deal with the internal problems with Afwerki and PFDJ, but in generally we have seen how people from Asmara and Addis Ababa, how they enjoyed seeing each other and things like that. So Ethiopia's intention is one thing, but as people who have been marginalized in centuries in this part of the world, I think the Afar rights, respecting the Afar rights, would not in one way diminish the sovereignty or the control of Eritrea in this part.
Okay, Mr. Ahmed, just briefly, so what does it entails, the self-rule of the Afar region? What does it entail? So many people, I think, maybe misunderstood it, from what I have seen. They think that, the self-rule or the autonomous authority for secession or having your own Afar state. But as you have been, clearly describing, it's not, your goal. The goal is to have self-rule. So what does it entail, self-rule? And then doesn't it take away also the strategic importance of, if you have like a self-rule, doesn't take away the power from the central government because of its importance of the Assab, So can you just, briefly elaborate on this one? What is the power that should be in the self-rule?
So when we talk about let's talk about this self-determination which everyone is talking about. So when we talk about self-determination, like I said, it's self-determination, internal self-determination, which gives, like I said, autonomy to the Afar people in Dankalia to self-govern. That means to have a say in how they govern their people, day-to-day life of their people, and how to benefit from natural resources, the wealth of Dankalia. As indigenous communities, they have strived to support their families as they have done for thousands of years. Whether it's the sea, whether it's the land, like I said, in salt minings and traditional economies of Afar people. As you know, right now, the Afar have no right to even go fish in their sea. They have no rights to freedom of movement. They cannot take their animals from one place to another. To make things worse, the militarization, the excessive militarization of Dankalia. These Navy generals are given more rights to the Yemeni fishers than their own Afar fishers. So anybody who was caught in the crossing the Red Sea or fishing in the sea is shut down by the Eritrean Navy, and we have lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. To have a self-governance in Dankalia would mean to provide a way of life to Afar people, to have a freedom of movement, to protect the cultural identity of Afar people. This is one thing that we have been neglecting since the takeover by PFDJ. The Afar have no means, like you and I are speaking right now, we have no means of expressing ourselves as a cultural distinct ethnic group. We do not have a television, we don't have a newspaper, we don't have a radio that reflects the Afar culture and have a form of a cultural what do you say, the Afar the Afarness. So we do not have the rights to, number one, no rights to govern ourselves, no rights to live off our land as economic and indigenous people. We have no rights to protect our culture and language and so on. All of this have been taken by the current Eritrean regime, so that you mentioned Ethiopia's intention to take Assab and such. What is the Eritrea's intention? What is the PFDJ intention when it comes to Dankalia? This is what we have tried to expose. thousands of Afar people have died. The United Nations and special rapporteurs have documented over 200,000 Afar people have fled because of persecution to neighboring countries. It is an occupation. It's an internal colonial occupation. That's how we see the current Eritrean regime. So given the fact that Eritrea would one day be democratic nation, so the Afar people will exercise the rights to self-determination by means of self-governing themselves, having a good relations with our brothers in the rest of Eritrea, as well as our neighboring nations. So this is what we mean to have a self-determination in Dankalia.
All right, Mr. Ahmed. In recent months, Ethiopian Prime Minister AB Ahmed made multiple speech with regard to the Ethiopia's demand to access to the sea. In his last speech, AB Ahmed said that Ethiopia deserves access to the sea on a couple of different grounds. He said that historically, geographically, and ethnically, he said, Ethiopia deserves access to the sea. Does his argument have any merit, especially with regard to the ethnically? He was mentioning that because there was Afar in Ethiopia, there was Afar in Eritrea, and stuff like that. So does he have any merit on those grounds to have Ethiopia access to the sea?
Well, I don't know if you've seen our press release
I did.
On October 20th in this regard. We have said we sent a press release. I'm sure the Ethiopians have received it. In the press release, we said the Ethiopian government must recognize, again, the territorial rights of Eritrean Afar nation to access the port of Assab. We said, and we made it clear that that we are not opposed to Ethiopia having access to the sea. But we unequivocally mentioned that the sovereignty of Eritrea need to be respected, and to have a claim over this land as the integral part of Ethiopia is a problematic approach, and this should not be the way to go. And we also stated that the people of Afar and other Eritreans are being ethnic cleansed by the Eritrean regime, and to have a normal relations with and access to the port would require the removal of the PFDJ as a system from its roots. So we have said, and this is the primary goal, and we are willing to work with the Ethiopian government to help us, assist us to removing this regime that is an obstacle, not just for Ethiopia's access to the port, but it is a systematic, tyrannical system that has been uprooting Eritreans from their homeland.
So why do you think is Abiy Ahmed raising these issues right now? In the early days of the peace agreement, Abiy Ahmed stated that in the Millennium Gathering, making friendship with Isaias will lead to gaining access to Assab. However, that doesn't get materialized. Why is that? And then also, why do you think Abiy Ahmed has this requests, repeated demands with access to the sea right now?
Well, if we take Abiy's Prime Minister of Ethiopia's answers, he raised a lot of possibilities and historic facts. The one thing that stands up is that Ethiopia is in bad shape economically, without without having access to the port, which they have now with Djibouti port. The population growth would cause Ethiopia not to be governed properly. The people will demand to, the people's demand would push. So basically what he's saying is that Ethiopia's economy is unsustainable, and this is why we want the port of Assab. But what he should have said was to look for a legal means. And the other fact could be the internal political circumstances, right? Ethiopia is engulfed in wars right now. Prior to the war in Amhara right now, it was a war in Tigray. As you may know, the Eritreans have had a heavy hand in destroying Tigray, with the help of Abiy, and but that did not give Abiy or Ethiopia a comfort to have a good relations. Now we know that Eritrean regime is supporting the Amhara insurgency, and particularly the Fanos, to rise up in Ethiopia. And I think Abiy and the government of Ethiopia is seeing Eritrea as an obstacle rather than good friends to have relations. So basically, it could be a combination of factors, but the internal situation of Ethiopia is what is pushing Abiy to act in a way that he had been acting.
So
please carry on.
Okay, so one of the claim that AB Ahmed made was the access to the sea because of the Afar. One of the arguments he made was ethnically, there was Afar in Ethiopia, there were Afar in Eritrea. So that's also one reason that they should have access to the sea. So this is, of course, there are like Afar in Ethiopia, Afar in Djibouti, Afar in Eritrea. So, why did he has to claim that, Afar, because there was Afar in Eritrea and Ethiopia, and then he has, to have access to Eritrean sea, not asking because of that ethnicity access to the sea to Djibouti. So, what do you think is the reason? And then is it also a valid argument that basically because there were like people in two sides of the country, in Eritrea and Ethiopia, and then you have to have access to the sea. Let's say also there were Kunama in Eritrea, Kunama in Ethiopia. So does it mean that you have also to have, so how do you see his argument? Is this like a valid argument, especially with regard to the Afar people?
I think coming to the question of the Afar being as indigenous communities to both Ethiopia and Eritrea, I think there is a factor. I'll get back to the factor first, but after our press release, we have had relations with discussions with the Afars in Ethiopia in this regard. So the question of people of for example the indigenous rights, if you take indigenous rights as international instrument in like international humanitarian law or United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People, the Afar people being people who have existed prior to these international borders have the right to exercise their economic freedom. This is without getting into Ethiopia and Eritrea as states that governing the Afar people now. Through international law and humanitarian law, like you may know in Canada and United States, people like Afar, for example, the Mohawks, who live in state of New York and also live in province of Ontario. These people have access to going back and forth to have economic relations in respect to their territory. So looking from that angle, I think Abiy's message can be taken positively using the Afar. It's not to say, again, when we have this discussion with our brothers and the Afar leaders in Ethiopia, we have talked about the way the Afar can be used in a positive sense for socio-economic and cultural unity, to avoid conflicts between and to, for those of us in particular who have been marginalized, to bring an end to all forms of discriminations and neglect by the Eritrean regime. This would be a way to collaborate and have the Afar people-to-people relations through economic access. But again, when we have these discussions, we made it clear to the Afars, our brothers in Ethiopia, we respect the sovereignty of Eritrea. We are not about to redrawing the international borders that have been there. Eritrea is Eritrea, Ethiopia is Ethiopia. But we want them to understand that Eritrea's sovereignty, when we say Eritrea's sovereignty, cannot come at the expense of the Afar people, which have been seen right now. Like I was telling you earlier, someone else, the Afar are the most impoverished communities in Eritrea today. Like, you asked me how you were growing up in Assab, how things were there. Looking at the Afars in the 50s and 60s and 70s and the Afar today, we are the most at the lower scale of living livelihood, with having all these riches and access to the Red Sea. Like I said, we can't even benefit. The Afar, when the United Arab Emirates, for example, came in 2015, big portion of Assab was given to United Arab Emirates to have a military base in Assab. And this is on the salt land, on the fishing land of the Afar people. Guess what happened to the Afar people at that time? 2,000 Afar families were pushed off this land so that the airport can be built. Okay, so this is to show you that the Afar were actually doing very good economically. They were exporting their salt mining to Ethiopia. There were millions of dollars were exchanged. The Afar economy was booming. So the Afar had relations with Afars in this side, and I think if, again, it comes to the PFDJ, if as long as the PFDJ is in place, none of this is possible. What do you think after 2018, when peace relations with Ethiopia and Eritrea was blooming, the road from Assab to Bure was built. Actually, the port area was built. So like almost 70 kilometers of asphalt road was all set up, but Eritrea refused it. Why did Eritrea refuse it when they have a good relations with Ethiopia at that time? So I think the only solution for our problems as Afar people and as Eritreans and as Ethiopians is to have this regime in Asmara to be removed. As long as the PFDJ is in place, there cannot be any economic relations with Ethiopia or a democratic freedom for Eritreans. And Eritrea has shown time and time again that is a hostile nation amongst the East African nations. This is not the first time conflict has risen because of Eritrea's interference. So having said that, we are continuing to have these discussions with our brothers in Ethiopia. Afar leadership, traditional leadership, they support us in our mission to have the Afar internal self-determination, to have Afar state in Eritrea. But this also goes without saying that the sovereignty of Eritrea and the internal integrity of Eritrea is not something we compromise on.
All right, Mr. Ahmed. Again, as have been said, when you say self-determination, Afar state, that looks like you're looking for, separate country. But you've been clearly describing what your intention and your intent was. And then again, as you have been saying, people-to-people relationship, I don't think everybody wants that one, not only between the indigenous Afar people, but also between the whole Eritrean people and the Ethiopian people, because That's special people in the border areas are the one who are really affected by the situation between Eritrea and Ethiopia, or as a matter of fact, between any countries. Those who are getting really affected are the one who lives in the border, because they were like same people. They have a strong relationships. So when war broke out, those are the people who really get affected. And I can really understand how the Afar people are affected by the situation between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And then for the last 30 years, since Eritrea independence, you've been describing it earlier, the Afar people in Dankalia were targeted by the Eritrean regime. And then what were the tactics used by the regime against the Afar people to oppress them? And why do you think is the regime in Eritrea never used Assab, Masawa, for the good of the people of Eritrea? It's one thing that's not given access to foreigners. That's could be the choice of the government, but they never use it like for the people. If you see Masawa recently, there was a video circulating. It looks like was like archaeological site. The city doesn't look like it's a city now. It looks like from the thousands of years archaeological site. So this is like a port city that's supposed to be a flourishing, supposed to be a tourist site, supposed to be a trade center. But what you see is just really unbelievable. We don't have any pictures of Assab, but might be the same or worse than that one.
Worse, yeah.
So why is that? Why do you think is that the regime never utilized this resources for the Eritrean people?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying this is a regime, a clique, has a mentality. Like I said, I was starting with the colonization. This is it's a colonial. To us, it's a colonial entity. The regime. Yeah, so the regime in
this is Masawa, by the way, just to be.
Yes, it's tragic. It's a tragic, like you said. I mean, this could have been one of the most advanced ports in Eritrea. So when the PFDJ, when it first came, it came with the intention to not as a liberators that many Eritreans have thought, but as a oppressive cult, a tyrannical group, a close-minded a military entity, and that's how they still governing the country. When Eritrean government has used a strategy of ethnic cleansing the Afar population, the depopulation of Afar people. So all the historic facts that we have raised, they came to dismantle the economically the economic system, the political system, the sultanates of the Afar. All of these, the regime came with the mentality that we have to build a new Eritrea. Having these kind of ideologies, they came not with just ideologies, but in practice. For example, since it became a government in 1994, in the PFDJ conference, the Congress they have in 1994. The national charter of PFDJ was adopted in 1994, and they set out key strategic goals for Eritrea. Which with one of them says that new Eritrea will no longer recognize any ethnic diversity and previous cultures that existed for thousands of years. This is just one thing. They will have one form of Eritrea. So the new Eritrea will have a single culture, an all-embracing single identity. Okay, meaning it will have a Tigrinya domination ideologies. This is what they have, the Tigrinya dominating culture. Okay, this can be found in Article 9. So in 1997 Constitution, as you may know, was not unimplemented, but these colonial policies, these racist policies towards Afar has become the law of land. For example, the Article 23 of the 19th Constitution, even though it was not was implemented, gives all rights to the sea, to the fish, to the salt, to the Afar territories in Dankalia, all to the hands of PFDJ. That's how it is. That's why they've been selling the port and to the UAE, to China, to whoever is coming looking for a piece of land. So PFDJ took Eritrea as its own entity, as its own Eritrea, as its own property. This is why indigenous people like Afar have been pushed out of all the most strategic areas in the land. So this is why Eritrea has refused to grant a degree of autonomy, like we say, to the Afar people to self-govern themselves, like Haile Selassie did, like Derg did, like the colonial Italians have did, like the Ottoman Empire. Whoever came to colonize our people in part of Eritrea have recognized the degree of autonomy for the Afar people. As indigenous people, to have a say in their territorial and traditional land. The PFDJ systematically have used the worst form of colonial occupation over our people. So, this is why. Not only that, Brother Henok, I wanted to bring to your attention how the depopulation strategy is happening. For example, the targeted assassinations of the Afar traditional leaders, and the closing of, like I said, closing off all aspects of economic opportunities for the Afar people. The Afar people are mostly fishermen at the coastal cities, who live in the coastal cities, and the closing all the access to the sea and to the fish. They do not have a place where they can farm, as it is in part of this is their farm. Okay, so all of these have been a systematic way to displace thousands and tens of thousands of our people from these strategic and natural resources area. The Kululi Parash is another area that the Afar people have been pushed. Now it was sold to Australian corporation, and now I think back in the hands of Chinese corporations. This is to show you that Eritrea, the current PFDJ, has been nothing short of a new form of colonization to us, to the Afar people. So this is why we're pushing, to get rid of the policies of colonization, occupation, assimilation, the degree of human rights violation in the Afar region. When most of our brothers and sisters, when we talk about these kind of atrocities to the Afar people, they don't understand us. We think we have something wrong in a hidden agenda to break up Eritrea or something like that. But it has to do with the degree of human rights violation that's happening to Afar and other part of Eritrea, for example. The grievances are legitimate grievances, given our historic background to this part of the land, and how Eritrean systematic means of targeting, not just by military violent means, but look at the systematic policies that they have put in place in a constitution of Eritrea, which is unimplemented, but to us it has been ongoing implementation by the government, by the PFDJ. And that's how we see the current Eritrean regime is totally a foreign colonial tyrannical system. You cannot call them Eritreans, and this is how the views of Afar people need to be looked at.
All right, Mr. Ahmed, as you have been describing it, there is a massive human rights violation to the Afar people, to the Dankalia region. It's also the same also with the rest of the country. But definitely you are fighting for your people as others do. But at the end of the day, free Eritrea from this region, from PFDJ, is the solution for everybody. And then whatever comes after that is something that the people can decide. So I'm just toward the end of my question right now, Mr. Ahmed. Many fear that there may be a war between Eritrea and Ethiopia due to the arrogance behavior of the two leaders. How will this affect the Eritrean people in general and Afar in particular?
I don't think war is the answer. The war is contrary to what we have been working to achieve. And Ethiopia cannot afford it. Obviously, Eritrea cannot afford war. But it goes back without saying, the source of problem is 𝐒𝐄𝐂 Afwerki and PFDJ. If the sooner we get rid of PFDJ system in Eritrea, the better will be for all of the region's people, including Ethiopians. So Eritrea is not going anywhere. Eritrea is recognized nation state that have gained its independence, but the way the war propaganda is working is detrimental not only to people of Ethiopia and people of Eritrea, but it is a problem for the entire Horn of Africa. And I think I really don't see the wars happening. But if were to happen, we all know as Eritreans we are fed up with our own government, and we will, the sooner we collaborate, even with Ethiopians. And this is what we have mentioned in the past. Working with Ethiopians, as long as we get rid of the system, PFDJ system, we were willing to do that, because this is the source of the problem for all of our Eritrean citizens.
All right, Mr. Ahmed Yusuf Mohammed, President of the Eritrea and Afar National Congress. I have all the questions that I prepared for today, but I'll give you a last chance that if you want to have any message to people inside and outside of the country.
Thank you, Brother Henok. I really appreciate you and the ERISAT for this opportunity to send our message to the people inside and outside Eritrea. My message to my fellow democratic opposition groups, we have a lot of soul searching to do. The dreams and aspirations of our people are not one single dream or one vision or one single culture, as the PFDJ have told us. The PFDJ is anti-Eritrean dreams and aspirations. The message of the way how we transition ourselves to the democratic nation is to have understandings, the grievance and the historic facts of the Eritrean nations and nationalities, the people that came to found to the new country of Eritrea that we of all want to see. So our organization, Eritrea and Afar Congress, put a model for a democratic transition and a unity between Eritreans, and we called it the Afar Model. And we had a conference in Pennsylvania, United States, in July of this year. The declaration, or the Afar Model, reads like this: the solemn will of the Eritrean diaspora opposition groups, and we, as Afar and other Eritreans, we are together in protecting the sovereignty of Eritrea, the territorial integrity of Eritrea, and traditional borders by all means. Resolved to commit ourselves to establishing a decentralized federal democratic Eritrea, decentralized Eritrea, and to have resolved to establish a power-sharing constitution that distributes power between Eritrean provinces, as I mentioned in the past, and that to have each provinces or regional state have the right shall have right to exercise the self government and political autonomy in their respective regions, that each provinces through the government they freely elect shall have the right to own and control their land and resources. And then goes on to say that we will apply the application of rule of law and the constitution need to be guaranteeing all these rights and the rights to a decentralized form of constitution that will give rights to all of our people. And basically, this is a message that I wanted to send to our brothers and sisters in the democratic oppositions in Eritrea, that the Afar are one of you. We mean what we say when we want to protect the sovereignty of Eritrea, and that have understanding of sharing power, sharing natural resources. This is the only way that we can transition from the current oppressive tyrannical system into a full-fledged democracy in Eritrea. And thank you for this opportunity.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ahmed Yusuf Muhammad, and I really appreciate for coming to ERSAT to explain the stance of your ENAFC, Eritrean National Congress, and also in general the feeling of the Dankalia people. So I really appreciate, and hopefully we will have another discussion another time. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Anna.
I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
لو تغينا مسكنوا فلنا فريه لنا تطعلنا
سلام ኣብ ርሑቕን ቀረባን ትርከቡ ተኸታተልቲ ቴለቪዥን ኤርትራ ከመይ ቀኒኹም
مقالة
سفي أسبحت نحق فرح نزيد